Hey guys, True Grit Scott, Bulletproof Saws and BLUESAWS.com. Hope everybody's doing all right. Man, I've been busy. So I started making this OEM 460 video the other day. God, this feels bright. I feel like I'm getting hit by too many lights, and when I'm working I like a lot of lights, but for some reason making the videos it throws me off. But if I don't have them on, it'd be too dark. Anyhow, I started making this 460 video the other day, and I had just broken apart the case, and I think that's where I left off. So I broke it down and cleaned it up, and the plastics, like, and I don't go, occasionally I go insane trying to do like a beautiful restore, but this is going to be a work saw. A guy's going to be using it in a tree business. And man, I hope you could see, but the cases, or the plastics, came out really nice. So that was kind of nice, and all I did is I threw them in the parts washer, and I hadn't used the parts washer in a while. I had a mix in there with, I believe it would have been Awesome Cleaner, something along those lines, in water, and it had been sitting for quite a while, and I don't know, maybe the Awesome Cleaner dissipated because it wasn't working real well for me. And I have an aquarium heater in there to heat up the water, and that takes a minute. But I wound up just using Blue Dawn dish soap and scrubbing everything, and I thought it came out really well. This isn't a beauty restore. It's a working restore. And I got all the paints off the bottoms, and I thought about, I should go match this paint. And I know there's a few different paints that match the OEM steel white, or are pretty close, and I don't know that that's the way we want to go, and I don't know that that's necessary. And I almost thought, and I haven't tried this before, I kind of don't mind the worn look on it, and I was thinking about hitting it with a clear coat just to give it some kind of protection, but keep the rustic, vintage, used look. So I'm toying around with that in my head, but it's not real important to a build. I have to start snapping this back together, and because I keep getting distracted with other work that has to happen, I haven't gotten to it, but I figured if I can make this video just talking a little bit, then I can get to snapping it together, and I'll video that too for anybody who's interested. But the crank, we're rebuilding it with aftermarket parts, and I'm using a bunch of Farmer Tech stuff. Well, not a bunch. I'm using a Farmer Tech crank, and I'm going to use a Highway top end. I'll talk to you about the Highway stuff real quick. I told you guys years ago that Highway does a lot of the castings for Meteor. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I can't tell you this for all the cylinders because I haven't done the comparison with all of them, but the couple that I have, it looks to me like the Titan nickel cylinders are the best castings. The second best are the Meteors. The third best are the Highway Nicosil, the GX cylinders. And what I mean by that, I guess I should have been prepared here, is that when you look at just the overall quality of the castings, any blemishes on the outside, ports, everything else, they must split them up between A, B, and C. And I don't want to say it like that because I don't want you thinking that the Highway Nicosil GX cylinders are bad. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when they go through them, it's pretty obvious that the Titan nickel ones are the nicest. The Meteors are very nice also, but they're definitely the second nicest, and you can see a difference. So I think they're going through, they're picking out the best looking cylinder from a port perspective, from an outside the fin perspective, everything, and taking them for the Titan nickel. Then the second ones are going to be the Meteors. And again, I don't know who's doing the plating for Meteor. They may go back to Italy to get plated. So it's a total different plating, and that has ramifications when you're grinding on them because these Titan nickels are really difficult to grind on. This is going to be a stock saw. It's going to be 52 millimeter Titan nickel going right back in it, and I picked this cylinder because it was real pretty. So overall, the tight nickels are the nicest. Overall, and maybe that's just aesthetics, the Meteors are second and the GXs are third. So I don't know that it means a damn thing in performance. It really doesn't, because now we got to get into port timing and port shape and a whole bunch of other things squish. And the whole thing with aftermarket cylinders, it's changed over the last 5 years. They've gotten better in a lot of ways. They've gotten a lot of port timing better. They've gotten a lot of the quality issues significantly better. That being said, there's aftermarket cylinders with horrible timing numbers. If you don't have the capacity to cut the bass in the band, you cannot get the timing where you're going to want it to be. So you can grind on it. You could maybe flow it and make it, a little bit nicer, but you're not going to be able to get good, I want to say it like that. You might not be able to get timing numbers you want. Some have very good timing numbers out of the box. It depends. Anyhow, moving. I didn't mean to get distracted on cylinders, guys. I try to puke enough information on you to make a video worth watching and not totally put you to sleep. So, we'll talk about this Farmer Tech crank. And I was kind of curious comparing it to the OEM crank. And they're really nice looking cranks, and I think they've gotten better and better, and I don't have a lot of crank failures. And what I've said in the past, and I don't know that this has changed, I suspect it's gotten a little bit better. But I would tell people, listen, if you're milling every week with a 660, I kind of don't expect more than 3 years out of that crank. And about 2 months after I said that, Greg Chappie Myers is a hell of a chainsaw miller. He's running Farmer Tech stuff and doing fantastic with it. He's a buddy of mine. We became friends through the saws. And he opens up a 5-year-old when I think that the 660s weren't that great. 5 years ago, we had a lot more problems than we do today. He opened up every bit of 5-year-old, maybe 6-year-old 660, pulls it out. The crank is beautiful, nice and tight still. Even the case bearings, which I never have problems with the aftermarket case bearings. We do a lot of saws and I just don't have the problems. I'm not saying nobody does, but I don't hear a lot of problems with them, and I haven't seen very, very few problems with them. And that 5-year-old saw, 6-year-old saw, everything was perfect. He put the whole thing back together and said, I'm going with it. So that's one of the, and I'd like to have more saws like that. And I have a few 5-year-old saws, but I haven't been running them like he is. Like right now, we're so busy with BLUESAWS and growing that I haven't had time to run some of those 660s milling the way I want to. But I have 5 and 6-year-old saws that still run. I'm just not using them every single week, milling and abusing them. So it's a good test, because I always tell people, like, I've seen OEM steel saws that are 20 years old and still running. How much use they got is I don't know, but I see 10-year-old saws, but then I see a saw like this with very little use where the crank failed. I guess what I'm trying to say is the stuff's getting better, but it's hard for me to tell you how much better in every instance. It takes years to figure this out. Hey, the cranks are great. If you only have a year's worth of data, well, maybe do that consistently for 5, 7, 10 years, and now we're talking, but it takes 5, 7, 10 years to figure that out. So I don't have answers on everything, and I'm questioning everything, and time will tell. So anyhow, I weighed these two cranks, and they're within 1/10 of an ounce of weight of each other. Couple things that jump right out at me, and I got the calipers out, and I started measuring different things. The tolerance on the crankshafts are the same. I can't tell you if it's wonky wobbly, but I generally don't have that problem with cranks. Years ago, we had a couple issues, keyways cutting the wrong, like a little bit off, things like that, but I'm not seeing those issues as much anymore. So when I get to measuring, 0. You know, and listen, this is quick and dirty, and somebody could be a heck of a lot more accurate with it. But with my quick and dirty, you know, how round is it in a couple different spots? And if I'm at 14.98 all the way around, and then I go to the OEM one, granted it's used, so maybe that matters. I don't think it should. 14.98, and I spin it. Yeah. For some reason it jumps up 15.01 there for a second, but even. Everything is the same as far as that goes. What jumped out at me is that the lobes on the crank, on the aftermarket crank, got up. Maybe I'll try. It might not work. I'll try to line these up and get them on the video. They're spread out a bit more, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to get them even and show you, but the lobes on the OEM cranker are tighter together. So what that does is there's a little more play from left to right on the rod than it, well, I can't move the OEM one because it's locked up, but there's less play in between. Additionally, this has cuts in it to let oil get into it. Good or bad, I don't know. I would think that's good. That's the only difference, but when I get to measuring everything, there's a lot the same. The only other thing that I thought was beefier on the OEM crank is the little end is thicker. And it's tapered nicer. It's more sculpted than the aftermarket, but I've also never had on a 460 or a 660. Actually, never had any of them break on the little end. Like, the crank itself hasn't broken, so I guess the point's moot. I guess I'm wasting your time, guys, but what I'm saying is they're not bad, and that's how we're rebuilding this one. I could fish around for OEM used parts, and not worth it. What else was I going to tell you guys? I don't know. I'm going to start putting this back together. Hopefully we have luck with the crank. I do hear of an aftermarket crank failing here and there. I have OEM cranks failing. It's, you know, if you asked me, I'd say, hey, every aftermarket, every Farmer Tech 660, they don't torque the cylinder bolts right, and I'll tell you, every single one of them isn't correct from the factory, period. Maybe there's a small percentage that are, but for the most part, they're not great. But what I will tell you is a lot of the aftermarket parts are lasting longer and longer, and I'm having better and better luck with them. Take it for what it is. If you drop me in the middle of deepest, darkest Africa and I could only have one saw and I had to pick between one Farmer Tech saw and one OEM saw, I'm picking the OEM saw. Period. But then again, I could get 3 or 4 Farmer Tech saws for the price of that, and maybe I'm better off going with 3 or 4 Farmer Tech saws. So you can argue this 1,000 ways and guys get all up in arms about it. I'm just telling you what I see in my little neck of the woods and just trying to give you guys some information. Probably boring you to death. I've made videos on how I press in cranks. Oh, that was the other thing. The case bearings are good. And they're OEM bearings. And again, I don't have problems with aftermarket bearings, but I'm going to keep the OEM bearings in it because they're beautiful. They're still fine. It was a low use saw, so I'm going to stick with that, and everything else is getting swapped out. She cleaned up nice. Looks pretty beautiful. I don't know if you guys can see. Yeah, there's some paint chipping, but overall, it came out great, and I think it's going to be real nice. I think the customer will be real happy. I think that was a video. It's late at night. later than it should be for a video. I should be getting into bed, but I wanted to do this that way I could first thing tomorrow get this put back together and start running it. What else did I have for you guys? I think that was it. I know I'm forgetting something though. Anyhow, guys, just 2 seconds on a crank. That's it. That's your video. We'll start the rebuild tomorrow. I guess I'll video, like I was saying, I have videos of how I press in the crank, so I'm debating whether I should re-video me doing this one, but maybe it makes the whole build process more complete, so maybe I'll video that. I'll press in the crank on this. We'll start doing this, torquing the case bolts, and then how I put the cylinder on, and then go through, you know, first steps before the rear handle goes in. I do a leak down test, so I do pressure and vacuum and all that stuff. So I don't know, I'm tired and I'm probably rambling. I'll end this here before I talk too much. I'm forgetting something. Anyhow, guys, True Grit Scott, Bulletproof Saws at BLUESAWS.com. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.